I'm Monica, a 30-year-old software engineer, and for most of my life, our family home in Burlington, Vermont, felt like the only place where I truly belonged. I had poured years of work, money, and emotion into keeping that house alive. Every wall held a piece of me. Every repaired corner felt like a promise I had made to my family. So when my mother slammed her fork on the dinner table and announced, "You have 48 hours to get your things out. The house is your sister's now," it felt like a knife slicing straight through my chest. My father didn't even look up. He simply nodded, agreeing silently with her cruel decision. And my sister, who had barely visited, barely called, barely cared, was suddenly the queen of the house I had kept standing. I froze. My heart pounded the way it does when you're about to fall from a great height. I didn't argue because I knew arguing wouldn't matter. My mother had already decided. My father would follow whatever she said. And my sister would take whatever she could get without a second thought. I walked quietly to my room, shut the door, and gripped my phone until my knuckles turned white. They thought I would walk away without a fight. They thought wrong. In those first minutes of shock, anger began to take shape. Sharp, focused, and determined. The next morning, I woke in the same house they had just pushed me out of, the weight of their betrayal still squeezing my chest. I had spent years supporting my parents. When they hit a financial collapse 5 years earlier, I stepped in without hesitation. My software engineering salary covered their overdue mortgage. $80,000 spread over 3 long, exhausting years. I handled repairs, bills, and emergencies because I believed we were a team. I believed family meant loyalty. When the bank had threatened foreclosure, I still remember my father sitting at the kitchen table with his head buried in his hands, while my mother paced the room, her voice cracking with panic. I couldn't stand to see them broken. I had drained my savings and worked overtime until the loan was paid. The relief on their faces made every sacrifice feel worth it. Or so I thought. I renovated the living room, repainted the walls, repaired the stairs, and restored the house piece by piece. My sister, living carefree in California, laughed whenever I mentioned bills or responsibilities. "That's your thing, Monica," she had said once. Our parents always spoke of her with pride. Her job, her life, her choices, while treating my presence like an obligation rather than a contribution. I ignored the imbalance because I believed the love was still there. Last night proved how wrong I had been. Their betrayal burned deeper than anything I had experienced. It wasn't simply unfair, it felt deliberate, cruel, calculated. They knew how much I had invested, how much this home meant to me, yet they handed it over to someone who had given nothing. I walked through the house that morning, staring at the sofa I had bought with my first big paycheck, the curtains I had chosen, the TV mounted by my own hands. All mine. And now they wanted her to enjoy it. Not a chance. By afternoon, I needed clarity, so I called Kristen, my best friend since college and now a sharp, no-nonsense lawyer. When she answered, I could barely contain the chaos pouring out of me. I told her everything. The dinner, the ultimatum, the silence of my father, the entitlement of my sister. Kristen listened carefully, then simply asked, "Do you have any legal documents related to the house?" I didn't. Or at least, I didn't think I did. But I remembered my grandfather, the original owner of this house. He had passed away 2 years ago. I had always assumed he left everything to my parents. Kristen promised to make some calls. While waiting, I paced the hallway and pulled out old photos of my grandfather. I could still hear his voice telling me stories on the porch, always ending with, "Monica, this place will always be yours." At the time, I thought he was just being loving. I never imagined those words could have been literal. An hour later, Kristen called back, her voice tense. "Monica, listen carefully. We found your grandfather's will." My heart stopped. "He left the house to you. Only you. Not your parents, not your sister. You are the sole heir." I sat down hard, the room spinning. My own parents had hidden this from me. They had known. They had lied. They had erased my grandfather's final wishes just to give everything to my sister. In that moment, something inside me shifted permanently. The hurt transformed into a cold, steady resolve. I wasn't going anywhere. I wasn't surrendering the home that was legally, and rightfully, mine. If they wanted a battle, I was ready. Kristen's discovery changed everything. The house wasn't my parents' to give away, and it certainly wasn't my sister's to inherit. It was mine. Legally, undeniably mine. My grandfather had trusted me, believed in me, and made his intentions clear. The betrayal of my parents hit even harder now, knowing they had hidden the will, watched me pour $80,000 into the mortgage, and still planned to hand everything to Tara. I felt anger rising inside me like a storm, but this time it wasn't blinding. It was sharp, focused, and strategic. If they wanted to play dirty, I would respond with facts, not tears. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The house was quiet. My parents were visiting friends in Montpelier. I stood in the living room, my living room, and stared at the sofa I had bought, the floorboards I had fixed, the curtains I had hung. If they were forcing me out, I wasn't leaving anything behind for my sister to claim. I started making a list of every item I had personally purchased. The flat-screen TV, the washer, the sofa, even the dining chairs. I had receipts for everything. Kristen had told me these details mattered. If we were going to enforce the will, I needed clear documentation of my contributions. As I tagged items with sticky notes, marking what was mine, a sense of control settled over me. I had spent years letting my family set the rules. Not anymore. After finishing the list, I called a local moving company. Green Mountain Movers. I need a rush job, I said firmly. Today. The man hesitated but eventually agreed to send a truck by noon. When I hung up, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and strength. Removing my belongings felt like cutting ties, but it also felt like reclaiming my life. By 10 a.m., 2 neighbors stopped by. Mrs. Linda, a sweet woman who had always treated me kindly, stood at my door with worry in her eyes. "You all right, Monica?" she asked. I forced a small smile and told her I was moving a few things out. She squeezed my arm gently and whispered, "You've always cared for this house more than anyone. Whatever is happening, you don't deserve it." Her words warmed me more than she knew. Moments later, Mr. William, who had known my grandfather for decades, stepped into the yard. He looked around the house with a heavy sigh. "Your grandfather would have been proud of you," he said. Those simple words anchored me. I wasn't alone. My family might have turned their backs on me, but the truth, and the people who knew it, remained on my side. At noon, the moving truck arrived. The crew moved quickly, carrying out the sofa, the TV, the washer, and my bedroom furniture. Watching my things leave was bittersweet, but there was also satisfaction in knowing I wasn't leaving a single piece of myself behind for Tara. By mid-afternoon, the house looked empty, emotionally and physically. I stood in the living room, now stripped bare, when a sudden knock echoed through the hallway. When I opened the door, Tara stood there with her suitcase, sunglasses perched on her head, looking like she had stepped off a plane straight into someone else's property. She pushed past me without a greeting. "Where's everything?" she snapped, scanning the empty room with disbelief. Her entitlement made my jaw tighten. "I took what's mine," I said calmly. She spun around, anger spreading across her face. "Mom and Dad said this house is mine now. You don't get to strip it." I stepped forward, my voice cold. "Everything I took, I paid for. If you want a furnished house, furnish it yourself." Her lips curled in frustration. "You think you deserve something because you played the loyal daughter? Mom and Dad chose me. Not you." Her words stung, but I didn't flinch. "You haven't been here in years," I replied. "I kept this place from falling apart while you were living your perfect California life. You didn't care enough to call, let alone help." Tara stormed through the house, finding empty rooms and bare walls. The more she saw, the redder her face became. Finally, she grabbed her phone. "I'm calling Mom," she snapped. I shrugged. "Go ahead." She paced the kitchen while yelling into the phone, her voice rising with each complaint. When she hung up, she glared at me. "They're coming back today. You're done, Monica." I pointed to the door. "Then wait for them outside." She grabbed her suitcase and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The frame shook, but I didn't. Inside me, the resolve only grew stronger. That evening, I stayed at Kristen's apartment. My belongings were safely stored away, and the house situation was in motion. When my phone buzzed non-stop with calls from my parents, I let it ring. I knew what the voicemails would say. And when I finally listened, the panic in their voices confirmed everything. They had gone back to the house and found a stranger there, a man who claimed he was the new legal owner. They demanded answers, anger and fear in every word. But I didn't call back. This time, I wasn't the one who owed explanations. They did. When the voicemails from my parents finally stopped, the silence felt heavier than the ringing. I sat in Kristen's apartment, the warm light from her kitchen softening the edges of a day filled with chaos. My parents had returned to the Burlington house expecting Tara to settle in, only to find a new owner standing in the living room. They had walked into the consequences of the very betrayal they had orchestrated. For the first time, they were forced to face the truth they had buried for years. The truth written clearly in my grandfather's will. Kristen had acted quickly after finding the will. She contacted a trusted colleague in real estate law and filed a claim to enforce my rights as the sole heir. The moment the claim was submitted, the house was no longer under my parents' control. A local investor, aware of the situation and eager to acquire a Burlington property, made an immediate offer. Legally, ethically, and financially, everything aligned. The sale went through without a hitch. And now, the house they tried to take from me had slipped entirely out of their hands. My phone buzzed again, this time with my father's number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Monica," he said sharply, not bothering to hide his anger. "What have you done? There's a stranger in the house saying he owns it." His accusation cut through the air like a blade, but I stayed calm. "Dad," I said steadily, "I enforced grandfather's will. The house was mine. You knew that. You hid it from me." There was a moment of stunned silence before he exploded. "We were protecting the family. You can't just sell our home." I closed my eyes, steadying my breath. "You weren't protecting the family. You were protecting Tara. You were willing to throw me out of a house that legally never belonged to you." His voice tripped over itself in disbelief, but I didn't give him room to twist the truth. I ended the call before he could say more. Mom called next, her tone dripping with indignation and desperation. "Monica, you're tearing this family apart. Fix this." I almost laughed at the hypocrisy but forced myself to stay cold. "I'm not fixing anything," I said. "Not anymore. Talk to Kristen. She has the documents." Then I hung up and switched my phone to silent. The moment the line disconnected, a strange sense of freedom washed over me. For the first time, I wasn't the emotional punching bag. I wasn't the dutiful daughter expected to sacrifice everything. I had chosen myself. The days that followed were quiet, almost eerily so. My parents made several attempts to contest the sale, but Kristen shut each one down expertly. The will was clear. Their deception was undeniable. The new owner had a valid deed. The chapter was legally closed. Months passed. I built a life that felt entirely mine. I rented a cozy apartment in Burlington, close to my new job at a marketing firm where people valued my ideas and treated me with respect. Something I was still getting used to. The sofa I had fought so hard to reclaim fit perfectly in my living room. The TV hung neatly on the wall, and the curtains I had once chosen for my parents' house now framed my new windows. Each piece felt like a reminder of both the war I had fought and the peace I had finally earned. I hadn't spoken to my parents or Tara since that night. I had blocked their numbers, emails, and social media accounts. The silence was strange at first, heavy and cold, but slowly it became a sanctuary. Without their constant demands, manipulation, or favoritism, I learned how to breathe again. I learned who I was outside of being the daughter who fixed everything. Every now and then, updates about my family reached me through neighbors or mutual friends. Tara had run into trouble buying a house in California. She had counted on inheriting ours and now had to drain her savings for a down payment. My parents had moved into a small rental on the outskirts of town. Their reputation in the neighborhood suffered when people discovered how they had hidden my grandfather's will. Kind, supportive neighbors like Mrs. Linda and Mr. William didn't hesitate to express disappointment. It wasn't cruelty. It was accountability. Their lives had changed, but so had mine. Kristen remained by my side through everything. Over coffee one afternoon, she smiled at me across the small table in our favorite cafe. "You know," she said, tapping her pen lightly, "you're stronger than any of them ever realized." Her words settled deep in my chest, warm and steady. "Maybe," I said softly. "Maybe I just forgot." In truth, I had forgotten. I had spent so many years proving my worth to people who never bothered to see it. But now, standing on my own, I understood something important. My value was never tied to that house, that family, or their approval. My worth came from the courage it took to stand up, to say no, and to walk away from the people who expected me to stay silent. One evening, I stood by my apartment window, watching the Burlington sunset spill across the sky in shades of gold and pink. A gentle breeze carried the sound of distant laughter from the street below. My life wasn't perfect. Not yet, but it was mine. Mine to build. Mine to protect. Mine to live. For the first time in years, I felt whole.